Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today, our Webinar Wednesday series for the Texas Association of College and University Student Personnel Administrators, known as TACUSPA. TACUSPA enhances higher education and student success by cultivating relationships and engagement that promote leadership development among current and aspiring student affairs practitioners and scholars. Our vision is leading innovation in student development, engagement, and success. TACUSPA is an association of administrators, staff, faculty, students, and others interested in the professional administration of student affairs programs in higher education. The association's core values include development, advocacy, and networking. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, A Beginner's Guide to Academic Publishing. My name is Josh Meredith. I'm the Director of Student Life here at South Plains College, and I serve as the Director of Webinars for TACUSPA. I would like to take a few minutes to thank our sponsor and our host for this webinar series, Odessa College. Now, if you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the chat or save them to the end, but we will address all of those questions at the end of today's presentation. Now, let me introduce our presenters. We have Dr. Anthony Edwards. Dr. Edwards serves as an assistant professor in the Department of Educational Leadership and Technology at Tarleton State University. He also serves as coordinator of the Higher Education Leadership track of Tarleton's Master of Education in Educational Administration program. Dr. Edwards previously served as director of Tarleton Online at Tarleton State University and as a professor of biology at Panola College, Senior Vice President of Talent at the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce, and Science Department Chair at Granbury High School. Dr. Edwards has also taught in Fort Worth ISD, Huckabee ISD. Dr. Edwards' research interests include higher education leadership, educational technology, online teaching and learning, enrollment management, higher education marketing, STEM education, transfer students, community colleges, and academic advising. Next, Dr. Peggy Holzweiss. Peggy Holzweiss is an associate professor in the Educational Leadership Department at Sam Houston State University and holds a doctorate in higher education administration from Texas A&M University. Prior to joining the faculty, she served in higher education administrative positions for 18 years in the areas of student activities, student government, residence life, campus programming, assessment, and academic affairs. Her research interests include teaching, learning, distance education, online students, and professional development for higher education administrators. She joined TACUSPA in 2012 and served on the inaugural Student Affairs on Campus Journal editorial board, then returned in 2022 as an associate editor. She currently serves as the managing editor of the journal. Dr. Holzweiss has been recognized with a variety of awards, including an International Catalyst Award from Anthology, Sahi Educator of the Year from Texas A&M University, the Faculty Excellence Award in Teaching from Sam Houston State University, an Outstanding Staff Award from the Bush School of Government and Public Service at Texas A&M University, the Randy Matson 67 Association of Former Students Award from the Division of Student Affairs at Texas A&M, and 3 NASPA Excellence Awards. Lastly, but certainly not least, Dr. Pietro Sasso is an associate professor of higher education leadership at Delaware State University. His research amplifies the voices of college students by interrogating the themes of the college experience, student success, and educational equity in co-curricular spaces. He has over 90 scholarly publications, including 11 co-edited textbooks and more than 100 conference presentations. He has been recognized for his research with awards from the American College Personnel Association, or ACPA, and the Association of Fraternity and Sorority Advisors, AFA. He is currently a faculty research fellow with the Penn State University Timothy J. Piazza Center for Fraternity and Sorority Research and Reform. We are very thankful to have our presenters with us today. Please join me in giving them a warm welcome. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Holzweiss.
Thank you very much and welcome everyone. So I want to spend just a few minutes getting everyone on the same page. So if you'll bear with me, let me share my screen. And we can start just a short presentation so that everyone knows where we're starting from. And if it will go. There we go. So let's start first with the outcomes that we're hoping to have today. So we want to make sure that when you leave here today, you're going to know how to explain how academic journals work and what to expect from the process, that you know how to take actionable first steps and explore resources for academic publishing, and that you feel encouraged and supported in your path to academic publishing. We realize this is not necessarily a path that everyone chooses, but we hope that we will inspire you to do that. Nope, just kidding. Sorry, technical difficulties. Okay, so what is academic publishing? In a nutshell, this is publishing that has some kind of quality control, and there's different levels of quality control depending on the type of publishing that you want to do. So let's kind of review some of those. So we have newsletters, for instance. That it would not be like a high quality control area where we might have an editor or the newsletter coordinator reviewing your work. You may not have other people looking at it, so you may have technical errors that don't get caught or grammatical errors, those types of things that might come through with a newsletter article. A journal article, however, you're going to have what we call a blind peer review, usually double-blind peer review. And what that means is that the author is unknown to the reviewers, and the reviewers are unknown to the author. So there are people involved in the process, but there's no one that you are individually identified in terms of who's part of the process. And that allows people to give open feedback to make these manuscripts better before they're published, or to make decisions such as it's not a good fit for this particular journal, and to send it back to the author and have you try another journal. Then you go to books, and these are usually types of publications where you have to contact a publisher and propose a project. And most publishers will have different processes for that. So some will just want you to have somewhat of a synopsis of the book and what you hope to accomplish in every chapter, the overall purpose of the book. Whereas other publishers might want you to have the vast majority of a draft already done so they can take a look at it and decide whether or not they wish to publish it. And then we have conference proceedings, especially for research conferences where you're sharing some kind of research project. A lot of these will publish those papers as part of the conference itself. And there was my title. Okay, so types of publications. All right, so when you have a journal, the big issue for journals is finding the fit. And you find a fit on both the author side as well as the journal editorial board side. So you have to look at the purpose of the journal. What kind of articles are they publishing? What is the mission and the scope of the journal? And most of those journals will have that on their website, or should. So that as an author, you're looking for an alignment between what your manuscript is about and what the journal wants to publish. And then you look for the types of submissions. So a lot of journals are going to publish research manuscripts, but other journals like the TCUSPA Journal, the Student Affairs on Campus Journal, we accept other types of manuscripts. So we accept book reviews, literature reviews, research and brief manuscripts, and practice and brief manuscripts. And those last two are not as common in the higher education journal world. So you have to look at the types of submissions that a journal may accept. And if you have a research manuscript, a book review, or a lit review, you're going to find most journals will accept those types. You also have to look at what type of access that readers can get. Is it an open access journal, or is it traditional access where it's a subscription model and it probably is found through your library on campus? Because campuses, libraries will purchase subscriptions to journal publishers or specific journals. And that is something that they allow access to those who are part of the campus community. Other journals are open access, or you can pay to have your article be open access, even if there's a subscription model. That means it is open to anyone who can find it. Usually through different databases like Google Scholar. That's where a lot of people start. And you would be able to find the direct access to the article if it is open access. Some journals are completely open access. That is what Student Affairs on Campus is. We are completely open access. You have to be careful about fees because some predatory journals will charge fees, and it's basically pay us and we'll publish your work. And it is not a true academic publication. Our journal, Student Affairs on Campus, does not charge any fees for authors or readers. And so we are completely open access, and we can do that because we are sponsored for our online journal, and somebody else is taking care of those charges. The last thing you should consider with journal fit is selectivity or impact factor. So selectivity tells us what percentage of manuscripts that are submitted actually get accepted. And so if you have a journal that accepts only 5% of manuscripts, it's going to be very difficult to get in and have your work published. There's a lot of competition. If it's a higher selectivity, like 30% are published from what is submitted, then you might have a better chance of having your manuscript considered and published. Impact factor can be similar in terms of looking at how much the field of higher education is looking at this journal. So impact factor takes into account how many articles have been cited from that journal and over a particular time period. And the more articles that are being cited, the more we know that people are using the work that is published in those journals. And so a lot of times the selectivity and the impact factor can go hand in hand. It has a high impact factor, but a very low selectivity, but it doesn't always follow with that. So you have to get to know the journal that you are considering publishing your work in. The peer review process is something that a lot of novices don't necessarily understand, and it can be a surprise when you get into it because there are times where it can be very critical, and you have to kind of develop a thick skin. So the peer review process is basically you submitting your work, and then someone that the journal has approved as a reviewer gets your work. Usually that's the double-blind process where they don't know who the author is and you won't know who's reviewing your work. When the reviewer reviews your work, they have a set of criteria that they're looking for that the journal has stated is important to them. For Student Affairs on Campus Journal, we have a rubric that our reviewers fill out as they're looking at your manuscript. And then they make a determination, each reviewer, that says, what kind of response do we want to give? Do we want to accept this manuscript? Does it need revisions? But once revisions are done, is it going to fit with our journal? Or, is it not fitting with the journal and we need to have the author try again? So that's the peer review process. Journal manuscripts typically have 2 reviewers on each manuscript, and sometimes a third if those 2 reviewers have conflicting decisions. We'll send it out to a third reviewer just to kind of break the tie and see where we are. This process can take a very long time. And that's one of the things that surprises a lot of people. I know I have personally waited up to 9 months for just the first review to be complete. Doesn't sound like it would take a lot of time, but the peer review process is based on volunteers, and we all have to have time to review, and sometimes we forget. We get a notice that we have a manuscript to review, and we may not know to get back in there or may neglect to get back in the system and review the articles that have been assigned to us. Or we just may take a really long time as the reviewers to actually perform the review and have both reviews completed in order to get back to you. So sometimes we have one reviewer that will be complete and a second reviewer that takes months. And so the whole process gets bogged down. So at our journal, Student Affairs on Campus, we try to go for a 3 to 4 month turnaround at a max. So usually we're trying to get back to people within about 6 to 8 weeks. Communication can be interesting too. Sometimes the tone is a little bit more critical than maybe we're used to. When we work in our regular jobs, we get the nice support and praise for the work that we're doing. But when you write, people can be very overly critical. We're trying to help others become better writers or to improve their work. And so sometimes people can get carried away with the tone of their communication. So you will receive a communication back from the editor of the journal when you have a decision, and they will share with you what to do next. If you have a revise and resubmit, even if you've waited 9 months to hear back about the review process, they will likely give you 2 weeks to complete your revise and resubmit process and get the manuscript back to them based on what they've requested. So you have to be prepared for the timing, the critical communication at times, and sometimes a negative tone from reviewers who kind of forget there's humans behind the other side of the process. So we've kind of covered a few of the submission decisions. Again, accepting the manuscript without revisions, that is very rare. It does not happen very often that a manuscript is completely ready to go on first submission. You could have accept with revisions. So we're going to accept the manuscript, but you still have to make some changes to it. Again, that is still kind of rare just to have an acceptance on your first submission. More common is the revise and resubmit. A lot of authors get this decision back when they submit to journals, especially if they've had a good fit with the journal and the topics match. You will likely get a revise and resubmit. And at that point, the reviewer feedback will be given to you, and you will have to go through all of the reviewer feedback, both reviewers or 3 reviewers if you've gotten to that point, and go through all of their feedback and address everything that they are suggesting that you change. Sometimes you might find an edit that they are suggesting that you're very much against because it doesn't align with your project or where you were headed or even the methods that you used. And in that case, you just address it by saying, we considered this, but this is why we cannot make that change. And then all of those adjustments and comments go back to the editor and they'll review it. And it is not a guarantee that they will accept it and publish your manuscript, but most of the time, once you have been attentive to the edits that they wanted you to make, the reviewer comments, most of the time they will accept the manuscript and keep moving forward and getting into copy editing and getting it ready for the absolute final publication presentation. So expectations are that you pay attention to the process when they get back to you, because there's usually going to be a very quick turnaround. And so a lot of times you got to make time in your schedule, even if you have a busy schedule, in order to address these things, because revise and resubmit decisions can run out and they won't publish your work even if you resubmit 2 months later. They'll say, no, the window has passed. So you have to be very careful about the timing. And we wanted to share this QR code. I put together some resources, some videos, some web pages that go a little bit more into detail about all of these areas that I've covered just briefly here, but you can learn more by going to some of the resources that are provided in this QR code. So if you would like to use your phone to scan the QR code, you can do that here. And then I'm going to stop sharing as I turn it over to the panel. Anybody have questions?
There was one question in the Q&A.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, okay, Dr. Edwards answered it. But the question was for everyone, do journals allow you to see the rubric beforehand? And then there was another question in the chat about SAOC and that rubric also being available.
Yeah, I will say that the rubrics for our journal, Student Affairs on Campus, they are available. If you go to the submission site on our journal webpage, you can scroll down to see all the different types that we accept and the rubrics. So we are trying to create a different kind of journal than we typically see in higher education. I mentioned that some journals and the people involved can be very critical. They also don't necessarily accept a lot of different types of submissions. So a lot of times practitioners don't necessarily see themselves in the different journals because practitioners, you don't have time. A lot of your work schedule is taken up with administrative work and working with students. You don't have time to do research projects. And so when journals are only accepting research manuscripts, it makes it a lot more difficult for practitioners to come into the process. So we are trying to be more open to practitioner publications and allowing you to see what the process is like. So we want to be very open and transparent about what we're looking for and what you'll be evaluated on in terms of your writing and the different types that we're going to accept because we want practitioners to be part of our publishing family.
So, hi, my name is Neil Golemo. I am the Director of Campus Living Learning on the Texas A&M Galveston campus, and I'm lucky to be a co-moderator for this. And I'll be very honest, I'm super interested in this because I am a recovering PhD student, and I have done so much great, amazing work that I really feel the world needs to know about. But I am intimidated by the process. So I guess my first question I really want to make sure, that I ask is why, like, what is the use of being published? What is the benefit, especially to me who, I would love to go at least dip my toe in the faculty space at some point, just to share all my knowledge, right? But also, like, what is the benefit, especially for those of us who maybe we haven't, gotten a PhD yet or in the process? Like, why does the world need to know what we have to share?
I guess I'll go. So, hi everybody. So I get this question even from my students, like, why do I have to read all these research articles, right? And they often think that research is just for faculty, that we just kind of sit in like a stall somewhere, just reading and writing, which is partially true. And it's the same for doctoral students. So if you're a recovering doctoral student, right, I can see why one would be like, this is an academic exercise in futility, right? And so really when we're talking about research, it's a conversation between scholars, right? It's a larger discourse that is continuous. And so I think when we're thinking about perceptions outside in the public sector about how they perceive higher education and its value, they often think about research as being prestigious, right? And so that's one of the criticisms about the study of higher education, right? For us as an academic area of inquiry and as a field of practice, we're often thought of being like folksy and provincial. So the more that practitioners publish, the more that it adds perceived legitimacy from those in the public sector and other academic fields. That's a long-winded faculty answer, but that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. The other thing to think about too is when we think about our like early deans of men and deans of women, they were scholar practitioners. They used to publish. And then somewhere along the way, as we specialized, right, we lost that. And so I think of plenty of VPs of student affairs or deans of students or directors who do make time to publish. And again, there are multiple forms of publishing. I think as we've just learned. So
I want to make sure that I heard that correctly. So, from my standpoint, or for, maybe like the people who would characterize themselves as non-academic, right, are practitioners. I think that I don't think I'm too out of bounds when I say there's this idea that this is for faculty, like this is for like the big brainiacs in the ivory tower, right? But what I'm hearing from you is that you almost feel the opposite, that if the more practitioners we have, the more legitimacy. Really, you need us more than we need you. Is that what I'm
Yes. And there are ways to sort of make it accessible, is to work with faculty to co-publish, right? And co-author. So I would encourage you to reach out to faculty to co-author pieces. It makes our pieces stronger, right? So that our like implications for practice are grounded in reality. So I think there are ways that we can find better ways to just work together more, and scholarship is one of the spaces to strengthen those connections. So I think, yes, we need you more than we need ourselves. Yes, I think it moves us forward in so many ways.
I knew it.
I would just add to that in terms of being a scholar practitioner, and that's something that we kind of focus on here at our institution, helping folks who are in the profession showcase to the rest of the profession what it is they're learning, because I think we're all learning. Whether you work in admissions or financial aid or student programs, we're all learning stuff as we go along, and we think everybody knows that. But I think what we realize, and sometimes in the process of writing it down, is there's things that we don't know, and we might have conversations with peers, but writing it as an article, in one format or another, because there's lots of different article formats, allows the profession to expand. And those of you who are trying to grow your career in student affairs, even if you don't see yourselves as an academic, I think part of your responsibility as a student affairs leader is to share what you're learning and what you're seeing with the rest of the profession, so that we can all grow and benefit from it. And it doesn't have to be, this grandiose, thing that we make it out to be. Everybody's research is different. Some people do these amazing quantitative models, and other people do these amazing, qualitative studies. And, but sometimes the simplest research is the best. It just depends on what it is you do and what you're comfortable with. And again, who you partner with at your institution or other institutions, because TCUSPA, you could partner with anybody in TCUSPA, really, if that's something you're interested in, even if it's not at your institution. But I think if we do anything today, is that to borrow a Wizard of Oz analogy, like if we pull behind the curtain, you see there's just somebody there, tinkering and doing a lot of things. This is something you can do.
And
We
I
have
will
a-
chime
oh,
in
go
with,
ahead.
sorry, I just wanted to chime in on, kind of a why should you personally do it? Think about your career advancement. If you aspire to other positions, mid-level to senior level administrator positions, even if you don't ever care about teaching, becoming faculty, if you aspire to a larger leadership position in higher education, publishing can get your name out there. It can help you stand out from other candidates for jobs. It can also connect you, even if you are not necessarily looking for positions, but you want to expand your network. When you put your work out there for others to read and it helps them in some way, they'll search for you. They'll come find you at conferences. They will come to your sessions. They'll search you out for collaborative opportunities and maybe consulting gig. You never know what will happen. we tend to stay in higher education. We stay in our silos. It's usually on our campuses or the state association that we have or the national conference that we attend. We have our people that we kind of gravitate to, and we don't necessarily expand beyond that often. So writing and publishing allows us to do that. And so I would encourage you to think about that piece of it. It can be an actual personal career advancement strategy.
Yeah, and
So
to
I'm gonna,
couple along with that, I'm sorry, Josh, but I would also kind of tag along to that we, one of the things that, again, if you couple this with, if those of you who do have doctorates, that there sometimes can be the opportunity to negotiate for a faculty appointment alongside of your professional duties. Sometimes when you're going into a new role, and that can be important, even if you don't see yourself as a professor, because we all know that we have interesting budgets in higher education and things change, and it sometimes could be a job security strategy to have a faculty appointment in addition to your administrative responsibilities.
okay, I'm gonna bring in a great question from the audience. So we had talked about you publish, people reach out to you, but there was a question, what kind of support do you give or see given to researchers? Is there a support system to help identify journals, or is everything just on the person writing and submitting to journals?
I would say go to your campus librarian. Your support system is right there. That's a good place to start. They know so much about the world of publishing, and they can help you identify different journals. There's usually support groups on campus for doctoral writing as well. They're usually in that space, even if you are not an active doctoral writer or in a program, they can still help you, like the graduate and professional office on your campus. They can assist you in finding resources that can help you along in the process. Some of it is independent, but there are people out there that can help identify good avenues to take and resources to pursue.
There was at one point, there was an open source, like crowdsourced spreadsheet that went around. And so you'll find versions of that on Twitter and other places like that, or on Facebook, on like student affairs groups, or your faculty might have it at your university, or if you know someone. But what I tell my students, especially if they're a novice reader researcher and they're just starting out, I say, pick something more accessible and then kind of build out from there, right? And so each professional association typically has a research or journal of some kind, right? So if it's NACA, they have it's like the Journal of Campus Activities, Practice and Scholarship, right? JCAPS, all of your regional associations. If it's TACUSPA or the Georgia College Personnel Association, New York has one. So there are sometimes state level ones, and they're all open source, open access. And so more people see them, more people read them, and so that's a really great place to start. They are selective, right? But they're more accessible, and they'd be more willing to work with you, and maybe even more like they might have a better scaffolded process to help you refine and actually polish your manuscript and your concept as well. And they're more willing to work with you. So I think I would say start small and then go large. And start to build out your confidence, right? When you submit to the more selective ones, like if it's JCSD, which is the Journal of College Student Development, or Review of Higher Education, tend to be more selective, have like higher impact factors. You're going to get highly critical feedback that sometimes can feel like nails on a chalkboard or sandpaper, right? And so you have very critical eyes, and they're meant to help refine your manuscript, but it's typically from researchers and faculty who can be a little bit blunt sometimes, right? And so they may not know how to couch the feedback in a supervisory style of high, low, high, right? And so it's kind of a blow to your ego. So I would say start small with some of the more like entry level journals that are really good. Like I publish in those with a lot of my students. And then I have my work in other spaces too. But that's where I've had the most luck early on in my career, is starting small and then like having to build out, and you kind of fan out.
So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna like just jump right off of that. There's one of the questions in the chat from Lisa was, about like mistakes that are made, and we kind of talked about how, like, I've heard the phrase thick skin. And so I feel like that's kind of like one of the gorillas in the room, I guess. And so let's just kind of talk about it, because I've been really lucky to spend some time with you guys, and I don't think you're rude at all. And so I'm really, I'm just curious, like, can you put more of a, make it, describe the beast a little bit? What are we actually talking about? What are we, what does it look like? And then, how do we work through it? Like, I'll put it this way. What is the second reviewer? Anthony, you answered that question for me earlier, and so I'm
Okay, sure. So reviewer two, if you Google it, there's a whole meme online about reviewer two. And usually you will get 2 to 3 reviews on your manuscript, and sometimes you'll see reviewer one says, this is exactly the kind of the manuscript that we need for this publication. It, fits, checks all the boxes. The research is outstanding. The literature review is great. You've identified the gap in the literature. Methodology is awesome. And then you get reviewer two sometimes who is like, this is the worst article I've ever read in my entire life. And the methodology is completely wrong, and the conclusions are not supported by the evidence, and you haven't established the gap in the literature, and it's almost completely opposite of what reviewer one said. And then you may get reviewer three that's like, okay, it's fine. And so, and you're like, well, you sometimes, if you're not prepared for a reviewer two, you're just thinking, where is this coming from? And sometimes they make sense and sometimes they don't. But part of it is developing the thick skin to know everybody isn't always going to like your research or the reasons why you did the study the way you did, or why you wrote it the way you did. Your goal is to get except with revisions, or because usually there's like the categories, and I think Dr. Holzweiss talks about this, where there's accept, which almost nobody ever gets, but accept with revisions, and maybe not accept, and so if you're getting accept with revisions, eat the humble pie, give yourself a day, get over it, write the revisions, and resubmit. Don't take forever to send it back, because they don't have time, even though they may only give you 2 weeks to turn it in, and even though they held on to it for 9 months, get it turned in when they ask you to turn it in, because that revise or and resubmit could turn into a not accept. So, but the reviewer two thing can happen, and that's just part of the process, because we don't see everything, and we think our manuscript is our baby, and our baby's pretty, and then if someone tells us our baby's ugly, and we're like, what are you talking about? So, but it is okay. It's a part of the process.
I guess I will add on to that too. You do have to kind of build a thick skin in the publishing process, because you do sometimes get that review or two that hurts your feelings, and there's real humans behind these writers, and sometimes that is not an easy process. But if you remember that most people are going to be at least fair, if not kind, and maybe not overly critical. you're putting yourself out there for criticism. I mean, that's really what this process is all about. We put our work out there, someone's going to evaluate the quality. Most of the time, that will help us get to a better level of quality by giving us some revisions that we need to do for the benefit of the field. But sometimes it's, it's a painful process, and you do have to kind of set your ego aside, because this academic publishing process, this quality control is necessary if we're going to have quality articles in journals that describe our research agendas, our research topics, our practice as it's unfolding, whatever it is that we're doing. It has a level of quality because people have looked at it and offered criticisms of it. Criticisms don't have to be bad. We grow from those things. And so if you go into this publishing process with an open heart of saying, I know I'm going to get criticized, I may not like it, but as Dr. Edwards said, you take 24 hours, give yourself a pity party, and then you get back on it and fix whatever it is that they didn't like. And even if you get a not accept or reject decision, you take whatever feedback they give you, you put it back into your manuscript, you make whatever updates you think you might need to make based on the feedback, and you go find another journal. I had a student ask me once, how many journals do you submit to? And I said, I keep submitting until it gets accepted. And you just keep checking a different journal, because you never know what will resonate with people and what won't, what will fit with a journal and what won't. So you just have to keep trying, and every journal is different. Every single journal is different. And I've had two very different experiences with the same journal 2 years apart, because the leadership had changed and the whole process changed. And so it's different from day to day. And it's even different from the same journal to the same journal at different points of time. So it's just a matter of you being persistent and continually taking in the feedback and making things better and trying again.
And sometimes you can be so close to the work because you wrote it that you can't see the gaps. And that's the value of the reviewers, is sometimes when you think you've made something clear and they say, hey, you went from A to C, but we don't see B, could you elaborate more on B? You may think to yourself, it's obvious, but obviously if they're asking you, it might not be obvious to them. So, again, like you said, take a breather and, then go back and say, okay, did I really maybe miss something that I could do a better job at?
Pietro, did you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I think too, like I agree with what everybody's saying too. And just remember that you can't submit a manuscript to more than one place at a time. Ethically, let's just take that reminder, right? Because I've seen that happen, and I'm like, no, let's not do that. And they ask you before you submit this, has this been submitted or published elsewhere? The answer should be no, because you haven't done that, right? So you have to shop around one at a time, and you reserve the right to pull it, right? So let me give you an example. I had an article that I submitted a year ago, and we had been through the third round of reviews because it was the third round of different reviewers, right? And it would conflict all of the time. And so I pulled it, right? Because I couldn't wait. It had been a year, right? So you reserve the right to pull it at any point in time and withdraw it. So if you don't like the feedback you have, you can pull it and flip it and submit it somewhere else. And so when to pull the plug is a brave move. Like, I had been so far and I wasted a year, but I'm like, they want me to change the findings. This is not okay with me as the researcher. So you have to know ethically what your boundaries are. And that comes, with experience. So if you're not sure, ask around. We're here on the panel to help you if you want to reach out to us. If you have some kind of ethical concern, or you're not sure about the process and what's happening, please reach out. So I think too, just understand that the process from the point that you submit to the point at which you might publish takes like up to a year.
So, thank you for pointing that out, because that was something that kind of freaked me out when I went to a session when I was at ACPA last a couple months ago, and that was surprised me. And so I was really kind of like taken aback by like there's a whole culture out there and expectations. So to hear you clearly, it can take a year, and you can't publish the same manuscript or proposal, at least abstract, to the same place more than once, and that's important to know.
Mhm.
Pull it at any point as well. Is that correct?
Yes, 100%. Yes.
So that seems like a weird power dynamic. Whatever. One thing, in our conversations in prepping for this, Peggy, you made a comment about some of the things that we do, because we're talking about these leadership of all these journals, and I just happen to know that you are, and so you talked about the level of like feedback and how the feedback is sometimes reviewed itself, correct?
Yes, and I mean, I can't necessarily speak to other journals and how they operate in terms of the manuscript review process, but I know at Student Affairs on Campus, when we get a reviewer that submits their feedback, before we ever communicate with the author, we're actually looking through their feedback, the comments that they're leaving, and making sure that it is at least delivered in a human manner, that it's a bit kind, even if it's critical. So we don't want to be reviewer two. We don't ever want to have a reviewer two. So we can be critical without being mean. And so if we ever had a problem, our reviewers are wonderful because they come from the TCUSPA membership. And we're all, administrators at heart, even if we are in faculty roles. So we all have that, let's deliver, news that may not be the best in a kinder manner philosophy. But if it ever happened, we're prepared to go back to that reviewer and say, hey, can we tone this down just a little bit? This seems a little harsh. So we don't ever want to deliver that kind of communication. So at least at our journal, we are looking at how we are communicating, the tone of what we're sending out.
Thank you. I just remember thinking that's really cool, and I just want to make sure that y'all got credit for doing that. Erica asked a really good question. I think it was like the next logical question from this. I called you out, Pietro, for mentioning the ethical aspect. And so her question has to do with, do researchers then produce different manuscripts using the same data sets, perhaps with modified topics or highlighting different aspects?
All the time. Yes. So this is what I tell my doctoral students, right? If you have something qualitative, right? Like publish only a few of the themes and split it up, right? So maybe you have, say you're looking at the lived experiences of college student activists, right? That's a theme right now, right? So maybe you have two themes that are really tightly tethered. You publish that as one manuscript concept, and then you have three more themes that they publish in a second manuscript, right? So you can split up your findings into multiple manuscripts. If it's something quantitative, it really depends on your research questions, and so you can rerun the same actual data set using a different analysis that's appropriate for your research questions, right? So you can publish something from the same data set, but you have to be very clear that it's not the same findings, right? And not the same research questions. So you just got to be careful about what you do, and you've got to be very ethical as you work through what that process is. So let me add one more thing too. Sorry, and when you're writing this, your implications.
So I guess
Oh, sorry.
it's a similar analogy to that would be if you have a dissertation. And can y'all hear?
You're coming in a little choppy, but we can. I think he's lagging.
I think he froze. Okay, I'll just go ahead then, I guess. So when you're writing this up, it is important to think too that your implications for practice are also not the same, right? So if you're splicing up your findings into two different manuscripts, however you do it, your implications for practice are obviously not the same, right? So these have to be separate concepts because the findings are not the same, and then how you link them to practice is obviously not the same. So.
And what I was going to add was that if you're, those of you who are in a doc program or a master's program, you may on your thesis or your dissertation have 3 or 4 research questions, and you may work with your chair after you finish to take maybe research questions 1 and 2, and your findings for that be one paper, and maybe research questions 3 and 4 might be another paper. And it's just, just different ways you could do it.
So I want to make sure that we get a chance to answer some of the other questions. What are some, just real quickly, what are some common mistakes that you see that you wish you would have gotten, that more people knew? Like, what are some common mistakes that are made, and what are some things that maybe are easy to miss?
Yeah, so for any journal manuscript you submit for consideration, make sure you're following the submission guidelines. Go step by step through whatever the journal wants you to do and make sure it happens. I know I've personally in the managing editor role for student affairs on campus, I kick back manuscripts all the time that are not blinded. Like they put a title page on it and like, nope, I'm not going to do it. I can't do that. It's a blind process. I can't have your name in the manuscript as you submit it. So I will kick stuff back all the time for not following the submission guidelines.
And you're not going to edit any of that as well, correct?
No, we don't edit people's work. We take it as it is submitted. And if we need edits, if we decide we want to accept it, we'll ask for edits and then the author will perform those edits. So we are never editing anybody's work.
Okay. So we have time for maybe 2 more questions. And so before I ask our final question, I want to quickly make sure we address this. In the case that we don't think that it's a good view, a good fit for our article, or we're going to pull it, whatever reason, what quick advice would you have for helping find a backup or your next journal?
What I like to tell my students is whatever manuscript you have, you've had citations, go look and see what journals those citations came from. Start there and just go down the list. Because if you cited something from a journal, they like that. They want you to use their work, but it also gives you an avenue of saying, I pulled work from this journal. And I'm using it in my study.
I think if you begin with the end in mind, as you're figuring out where you're going to submit the first time, it's probably good to have a plan B and C already in mind. So if you have maybe 2 to 3 journals that you think you might want to publish in, you already have it. You're not scrambling at the end to find another journal.
So for our final question, this is for everybody on the panel. I'm a big fan of Student Affairs Now, the podcast. And one of the questions they always ask towards the end are, what things are you troubling? What things in higher education are you pondering? And I'm going to adapt that for this topic. So, what are questions or topics that you're asking right now? And what role or what would you like to see in this realm of academic publishing? What role does it have to I guess what are you asking, and how can academic publishing help?
On my end,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Anthony.
I'm really interested in, I just say, and, for those areas, I'm really curious to see how artificial intelligence is going to change the ways student services professionals work. We talk a lot about it in the classroom, but we don't necessarily talk about it in terms of our work as higher ed leaders and how we can use it to help us do our jobs more effectively and serve students. So I'd like to see more articles written on things like that.
One of the things that I've noticed as a trend in student affairs across the country is that there are more collaborative offices opening up between student affairs and academic affairs. You see it a lot being called student success. It's marrying the two, and I would really like to see more work done in this space because I think that's the direction we're headed in higher ed.
I have sort of two things that I'm thinking about. Just what happens to students when like a university closes. We have a lot of closures, and so starting some research around where do the students go, what happens, what are their experiences, how do they feel about it. And so the idea of like a student being mobile and moving around institutions because like universities are collapsing into themselves, or what happens if they merge. What does that look like? That's something that I'm really pondering, and really just looking more at institutional types, right? We're studying the institutional types like HSIs or NPZs or MSIs, but we need a little bit more of like, what is it like to be a student in those contexts, right? Across multiple identities, because they serve such a wide array of students with multiple intersecting identities. What is it like for them? And so we have to tease that out more. If you're at a works college or like an MSI, or you're at a STEM college, right? What is it like to be a student at more of these mission-driven institutions, or ones that are minority serving? So just looking more at the nuances between students at varying like university types.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, we're at 12:57, so I want to be mindful of time. I want to say thank you to our panelists for joining. Thank you to our attendees. And Peggy, do you want to give one last final plug for the journal here to our attendees?
Yes, I've got a newsletter article, I think that came out this past month or is about to come out for the TCUSPA newsletter. And it's basically saying, think about all the summer tasks that you normally do. The reading that higher ed book that you couldn't get to during the regular school year, read it, write a book review for us. If you had a survey that you conducted on campus and found some interesting things out about your students and that somebody else at another campus might want to know, write it up as a research and brief article for us, and submit it for consideration. So the things that you are doing already, think about how you could turn it into a manuscript to share more about what's going on in your world with other people. And that's exactly what we're looking for from practitioners. So I invite you to go check out our website and see what kind of submission that you might be able to send our way.
Awesome. Well, thanks again to our panelists. I do want to give a plug to all of our webinars from here on out will be on our YouTube channel at TCUSPA Tube. So if you want to share this with somebody, say, man, there was so much great conversation and discussion, but they couldn't attend this webinar, it will be on our YouTube channel. So thanks again to everyone. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
On the YouTube channel, we include citations, both
Yes.
MLA and APA, so we make it super easy for you. And we are working hard on getting more of these things out, more content out to all of our users. But thank you so much to the panel. It has been a genuine joy to get to know you guys a bit. And I know I'm not the whole audience. I just feel that way in my head. And I'm so thankful. You made me feel much better about the process.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone. Hosts, panelists, stay on for a bit longer, but to our attendees, thank you for joining today.